Hi everyone, welcome to the Module 6 feedback. I think the aesthetic brief is always one of the modules that some people feel is just another day at the office, other people feel it's something that's really different from their usual day to day. And I want to just talk through two really good examples that came through. One thing I would say, as someone who worked for many years in an advertising agency, creative briefs, aesthetic briefs are things that are like any piece of writing. It's something that you have to work at. There are many people who are working as account directors, business unit directors, even MDs of creative agencies and work environments, whether they're departments inside corporates or small 2-3 person agencies or even freelancers, where the quality of their design writing is actually quite poor. And there's often a drift towards the visual, and spoiler alert, in some of these aesthetic briefs, there are examples of good design expression through the visual, and that isn't always going to be something that either you yourself have a particular talent for, or that you might have the time or the resources to prepare. At the same time, there are some basic things that we can do in terms of our aesthetic writing, our design writing, to ensure that we can brief things in effectively. And again, like all things in all these modules, I just want to advocate that we practice these things. So the first persons who we're going to be taking a look at is Tanya Lloyd's. Just quickly go through all the boilerplate. So the first question was around what is the context in which it's happening. What I felt was effective here, let me just zoom in so we can all see the copy, is that her writing was direct and to the point. Chainmail needs to have a strong, memorable look and feel. Images need to be of high quality, crisp, not cluttered and clean. Boom, done. Imagery needs to represent strong individuals of all racial demographics. Boom, done, perfect. Focusing on students as well as people from a professional work environment, to try and mix this up a bit. Our goal is to talk to people of all walks of life. So that was useful. Again, to the point. Images will only be used at the login screen. You see, these things I feel are good aesthetic writing. She's getting straight to the point and instructing directly. And so she continues. In terms of the design context, she explores the rule of thirds, and she makes it very, very clear through emphasis of exactly what it is that she wants. And that for me, throughout her writing, was very succinct, very to the point. Not trying to tell a story. A brief, the word brief is important. Like, you do not want to evolve into a narrative. You want to be able to go, cool, these are direct instructions, and here she speaks to each of these elements, speaks to an optional pin or pull out. She talks to the content area will be to the left of the slider. The area will have all the sent mail. So just in terms of the spatial layout, it's immediately clear in the writing, this is exactly what the application is going to look at. Then she talks through the symmetry stuff, and what I thought was very important here was, again, just this writing style, very effective, to the point, short sentences, punchy, good paragraphing in terms of going, why is it going to be symmetrical? Then considering the context in which the question is happening. Then talking about perhaps additional elements of symmetry. Then finally talking about transitional symmetry in terms of modals, etc. Well done. Color paletting. I just want to recommend, let's just see if you can, that you all, if you aren't aware of it, go to color.adobe.com. This is an absolutely wonderful tool. I mean, there are lots of equivalents on the web, but what's really nice about this is you can explore different color ideas, different color patterns for quickly pulling up templates and looking at relative palettes. So even for those of us who are not particularly well inclined to design, we can come up with directional palettes very, very quickly in terms of what a customer might want to be doing or what we think would work. We can also explore established color palettes and themes that people have worked on. We could search. So let's say I was going to create a website for a bank. Suddenly, okay, cool, here we can go and look at a particular color palette, download it, explore it. Very, very useful to play with and explore color. And here, so she derived additional colors off the chainmail branding, which was good. And then she looked at, copied an image from the web, I presume, I hope so. She didn't prep this in terms of looking at like an interface. She spoke about the visual hierarchy, again, just the general pattern of to the point, doof, 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 just explaining exactly what she wanted to the point. And then finally, fonts, again, putting together a font kit and looking at each of the different styles. Very, very effective. You can check out things like, again, from Adobe, type kits. Or if you want, you can also look at Google Fonts. Good way of sharing this kind of information. So if you wanted to play around with a particular set of copy, if we're going to say, okay, cool, I'm going to say, D course, and then I can focus in on this. Oops. I can see when I dial up the font, get a sort of sense of that. Look at different fonts. Fonts are an absolutely critical part of information conveying. I recommend that you buy a book. No, not YouTube. Called Just My Type by Simon Garfield. Really excellent book, all about fonts, the evolution of fonts. So if you can get it from the library or buy it online, I really recommend that you read that book. It's a really fascinating book that explores the use of type in terms of explaining language. Then going back to Tanya's, and then onto the functional primer, she talks a little bit about iconography, again, to the point. So this is really just a general theme, very well written, to the point, gets to the nuts and bolts of it. Javain, I hope I'm saying that your name correctly, took a slightly different approach. So let's drill into this. So he took a slightly more narrative approach, which wasn't necessarily a problem. What I liked about what I liked about his writing was he was kind of taking the designer through a narrative, explaining, I need the color to be calm, bright colors used sparingly to draw attention to important actions and possible tasks where needed. So he was speaking about the design in context of some of the usability concerns that he had. He wasn't making design decisions for the designer, rather he was talking to important ideas like, I need them to be basic and easy to read. I need there to be a clear hierarchy. So for me, this was really good because he wasn't making the design decisions, he was talking about the design outcomes that he needed. He needed interactions, animation, imagery to reward the user. So he's thinking about the user, the description of that is effective. At the same time, he used figures to explain the rule of thirds in terms of like how he would like to align items inside the environment, which I thought worked effectively. And then he also included an example by looking at an existing interaction design example of the importance of those thirds, cueing the designer, because you can't always assume that the designer knows as much as you do around things like symmetry, Gestalt principles, and so on and so forth. Used a good color guide in terms of like different ideas around why he wants to use certain colors in certain places, and included a creative blog image. Don't be afraid to include these things. I mean, you want to be careful because sometimes it can be a bit cheesy and the designers can feel kind of like that they're being instructed to, but including directionality on color, including your understanding of what colors mean, can be extremely helpful. Be mindful that in different cultures, different colors mean different things. So don't always take a Eurocentric or a Western-centric view on what colors mean because they do differ in different cultures. So be careful. And then included just a very simple, I mean, I wouldn't even call it a wireframe, I mean, just a basic layout, a proposed layout. This is great. I mean, the designer is still going to have the prerogative to change things around, but having a visual hierarchy and directing the designer as to how you feel it should work will work well. There was good selection of the actual fonts that he wanted to use, explained Roboto, explained why, spoke about why he wants to use particular fonts, And again, as the point I made earlier, reading and learning about fonts, it's a fascinating thing. Well, certainly I find it fascinating watching documentaries like Helvetica. Talking about the main headings in the secondary font worked well. And then, he again included and copied and pasted some examples in terms of talking about things like Z-index, taking examples of other pieces of software. Don't be afraid to do that. I think it's one of those things that can be very helpful, rather than just trying to articulate and verbalize exactly what you want built. Sometimes show things that have been done before that you want to use to inspire the person who's going to be putting together the aesthetic. So I hope you all enjoyed Module 6. I know it's one of those things that can be quite a tough module, especially for those of us who haven't come from a design background. But I think it's one of those things where you just want to continue that practice and keep up the good work. Thanks a lot.